We are here with Shannon McCormick. Shannon, you are a somewhat famous voice actor, actually.
Yeah.
I only knew you on Twitter for Magic Takes, so that was kind of neat to find out that you're in some of the stuff I already liked.
Yeah, no, that's always super fun. Yeah, like I don't curate my brand too much and only talk about like projects that I'm in or whatever. And so yeah, a lot of it I for the past year I feel like I've mostly used Twitter for engaging with Magic content and creators. It keeps me sane. I used to in the Trump era, or possibly the first Trump era, I was a lot more wound up about politics and would engage with that. And I'm like, I just need to keep myself sane. And I find that for as crazy as the discourse can sometimes be in Magic Twitter, I find it very easy. I find that engaging and keeps me sane and posting about Magic and stuff. So yeah. So I'm in some shows. I'm in some properties.
Yeah, I was actually the one that when we were talking about who we could have on as guests on the show, my first thought went to Shannon, but to be fair, he inadvertently shaped a little bit of what I find to be humorous, because I ran into him, well, figuratively ran into him for the first time as Agent Washington, and that role and so many of the things that he did with Rooster Teeth are some of my favorite things that I enjoyed as an adolescent. And just whenever I got to actually speak with Shannon, even through text chats, I'm like, oh my god, that's actually him. Oh my god, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. I'm just like, I'm just a guy who plays Magic in my free time, and so I appreciate you reaching out though and making this happen.
Yeah, I'm super glad we could make the connection. I'm Wayneright. I'm one of the hosts of the Hive Mind podcast, where we amplify voices in Magic. You'll find me here and on Twitter at Big Wayneright. Michael, do you want to briefly shout yourself out?
I'm a semi-retired content creator. Call me Michael, call me Magikarp. It's @MegaMagikarp_YT on Twitter if you want to see me do what Shannon did during the previous 4 years and yell at people about politics. That's mostly in my replies. My actual tweets are mostly about Magic and/or Destiny and/or whatever other things I'm into at the moment.
I was going to ask Michael. So you say you mostly engage with Magic, but your name is obviously a Pokemon-derived name. You've got a lot of Pokemon. Is Pokemon still part of your makeup, or is that just like a sort of a legacy thing for you that you've got like a Pokemon identity as well, or what's the story there?
The funny thing is, the name actually came as a self-deprecation. It was a joke that nobody wants a Magikarp, no matter how good it is. They just want a Gyarados. But yeah,
I got you.
To answer that, yeah, Pokemon is definitely a huge thing of mine, to the point where I say semi-retired instead of just saying I'm not making content ever, just because there's some projects of mine I've had working in the background where I want to go back into it, and I don't want to be known as a Pokemon YouTuber. I've seen some pitfalls of that kind of thing with other content creators where they start doing a multitude of things, but then they can only get the bills paid talking about Pokemon, and they end up not resenting it, but just like probably not enjoying it as much as they did at one point. So
you get trapped into that thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did the Pokemon thing as well, and you get a lot of kids in the chat, and it's not always like you don't always want to be engaging with literal children, especially with you don't know like where they're from or anything about them. It's like they want to like play the game with you, and it's like I'm not willing to engage with you in that way. I just want to have people here with me enjoying the game, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I understand. Yeah, that can. That can be a fraught.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Funny thing is too, like, it feels like the most casual, friendly way of engaging with Pokemon is the card game, which is the one aspect to it I don't play for obvious reasons. I literally just spent $250 on collector boosters of M83. You think I have enough for Pokemon? Are you kidding me?
No, I used to do the Pokemon thing as well. I actually played the online client quite a bit.
I heard that was a good client, actually.
Honestly, what most clients should probably be modeled after. It pretty much never has any issues. But why don't we, for the people who are listening at home who might not be familiar, Shannon, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us what you've been working on. I know you've got your podcast coming up here and tell us maybe some of the roles you've been in for the people who aren't familiar.
Yeah, sure. So I am an actor and a voice actor. I'm probably best known for my voice roles. I do on-camera stuff as well, but a lot of the work that I have done came through Rooster Teeth, rest in peace. So as Michael alluded to earlier, I started out working for them as the voice of Agent Washington in the Red versus Blue series. That turned into other roles for Rooster Teeth, both on camera, and then other voice roles. So I play Quartermaster in the show Camp Camp. I play Professor Ozpin in Ruby, and some other smaller roles here and there for Rooster Teeth. I've also been in some other shows. I've dubbed anime. I was the lead character in a not particularly popular anime called Back Arrow that I did for Funimation / now Crunchyroll back during the pandemic. I have a little bit of an on-camera presence as well. I was in an episode of Breaking Bad way back in 2008, and still get little. Yeah. So I still every once a quarter I still get a little tiny residual check from my appearance in Breaking Bad. Been in some small indie movies, small roles and things like that. But that's primarily my acting career. Sort of parallel to that, I'm not really a Magic content creator, but I do guest on various Commander streams and things like that with friends I've made online. I engage a lot with the Magic community that way. Oh, and I'm working on a podcast. Our first episode is probably going to come out sometime soon, and soon being here towards the end of June, early July. I'm not sure when this podcast airs, but it might already be out by the time you're listening to it. But I'm running it off of my Substack, so it's a newsletter and a podcast, and it's called The Odd Castle, where I talk to creators and interesting people in the sort of genre space, I call it, the nerd space. So it could be anything from people who are well-known tabletop role-playing role players, people who are well-known comic book artists, authors, actors, whatever the case might be. Usually people who either have a little bit of nerd fandom on their own, or they're in a property that attracts a lot of people to that, and they have a lot of authority in talking about those things. Mostly really interested in people who are also kind of working on indie or DIY projects that build a certain sense of community around them, whether that's a fandom or some other kind of community. So I've got 3 episodes of that in the can, and those will start rolling out pretty soon.
Sounds like my kind of show. Just another one to add to the list.
Yeah, and it's just a one-on-one, me talking with another person. So far, it's all been people I'm already friends with. So that, I think the true test will be when I get somebody on who maybe I don't know that well. If I can book somebody who's like, somebody who's new to me, or we only know each other from online, to sit down and have those conversations.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of that format. I think just like talking to people in the community is like one of the most interesting things, because you get to hear all the different perspectives, and you get to have really interesting conversations that you don't really get when you're sequestered in your own little Twitter space or whatever place you normally engage with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll have an aggregate link or whatever direct link to that. I'm sure that will probably come out before this episode or close to it. So we'll make sure that those links are in the description, so anybody who's interested in that can check it out too. We are talking today about returning to Magic, coming back to Magic as someone who's maybe engaged with it in the past in one way or another. And it sounds like that's the situation you're in, Shannon. Do you want to tell us about when you recently got back into Magic?
Yeah, so I have one of the more unique Magic trajectories of anybody that I know. I started playing Magic in the fall of 1993. My first sets were Unlimited and Arabian Nights and Legends. So I was in college, so my next door neighbors were big gamers, big sci-fi and fantasy people like me, and we hung out and used to do stuff all the time. And they heard about a little game, in the summer of 93 called Magic the Gathering. And they went down to the local game store in Iowa City and bought some packs. They had some packs, they had beta. They bought a few beta. I guess I don't even know how beta was sold. If they were boosters, they bought maybe enough to they can make decks. I got some unlimited. It's all kind of hazy because it was a long time ago. And then I graduated from college. I moved to Europe and did not engage with Magic myself personally until now I'm trying to think. So I was out of it for a long time. I started collecting in paper again in the summer of 2021. So I was away from it for 28 years. Now, that said, I did for a few years before I started, or maybe like a year and a half before I started picking it up in paper again, I did start playing on Arena. And that really kind of got me going. It was around, I'm trying to think when I started playing Arena. I guess it was probably fairly new to when Arena launched. Standard still included all the Ravnica, War of the Spark stuff. So that's what Standard was at the time. Yeah, so it was probably like in the spring of 2019 when I started playing on Arena. And I was like, oh, this is fun, this is cool. A lot of this was driven by my sons. I have 2 sons. They're both into Magic. And for a long time, I was like, oh, yeah, that's something they do. I used to do that back in the day, and they do whatever. And then something about it really, got me going. And then with the pandemic, I was just like, I was playing Arena all the time. And then I picked up, so I really got back into it with Modern Horizons 2, which was, in retrospect, kind of a dumb set to get into because I don't play Modern. So, but anyway, it was like, oh, this is cool. This is cool. So
that is such an enormous leap, going from like Legends to Arena to Modern Horizons 2. I wouldn't think anybody I could say that.
It's a super huge leap. Okay, so here is how big of a leap it was. I was playing on Arena or whatever, kind of beginning to follow some Magic content. I'd check out a Magic YouTube thing every now and again. Really dove in in the summer of 21. I actually picked up a set booster box or a draft booster box. I can't even remember what it must have been, a draft booster box. And just opened a bunch of packs, and I was like, that set was really had a lot of really interesting enchantment support, and I pulled like a couple of copies of Sithis Harvest Hand, and I was like, oh, like the box was kind of talking to me. And that was the first commander deck I built, because I was like, oh, I've got so many like great synergistic pieces. I could like start a commander deck with this. So later that year, I go back and visit my parents, and I was like, I've got Magic cards from back in the day in my room, like down in my bedroom in the closet. I was like, I think I have a dual land in there. Maybe that's probably worth checking out. I had 7 dual lands.
There we go.
You'll love to see it.
I'm like sorting through, like, oh yeah. So I have I have one of each of 7 of them. I don't have the Boros land, the Orzhov land, or I'm trying to remember what the other one is that I don't have. Maybe the Azorius land. I have Tundra. Anyway, I can't remember what it is that I don't have, but I've got 7 of them. They're including I got the more expensive ones. I got Underground Sea and Tropical Island. So
that's all you need, and those are the best colors in Magic.
Excuse me.
Yeah, and Volcano, right? Is that what's the blue red?
Volcanic Island.
Volcanic Isle. Yeah. So I pulled I'm like, okay, all right. I guess it's just something. But I had like literally forgotten that I had them. I was like, I think I have one. I think I have a dual land. We didn't know how good they were back in the day. We didn't understand. I mean, obviously, we just didn't understand how good they were.
They're a lot better now too, with all the support for lands and way more ways to fetch them out.
Yeah, well, and the way the fetches work, and they come in untapped, and all of that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, these are really good, and the fact that they're on the reserve list and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what their value would be if they were not on the reserve list and they could get reprinted every, like the fetches get reprinted every, handful of years. They'd still probably be expensive, but
I would guess if a shock land in an off time where they're not reprinted recently, like I wouldn't go off of current metrics. I remember most of the time if we're like waiting for a shock land reprint, I think like usually Watery Grave usually hit around like the 20 to 30 mark. I would imagine that Badlands and Underground Sea, whichever one it is, hits probably 40, 50 if it were constantly reprinted, just because
if you could constantly print it, right? Yeah, for sure.
So one question I have You were playing at a time where the rules of the game completely were different. Was it a bit of a shakeup for you to go and boot up Arena and be like, what the heck is a stack? How does this work?
There's a couple of layers to that question. The first is just the way we played the game. Everything was kitchen top Magic, right? You would just jam with your friends. We would just, we'd play 3, 4, 5 people against each other, just like, let's go, So that was just how we played. Now, obviously, competitive Magic starts very soon after the inception of the game. They start codifying how it gets played. I never engaged in competitive play at all. So that was like a big change. And then I was like, what is this commander thing that people know? What's going on with that? So I had to learn about all of the different formats that had been cooked up, because there was basically, there was what was essentially standard, right, at the time, because it was there was only kind of one, there was these fleets of, the expansion sets that were coming out. I was out before. I think the last set that came out when I was engaged was Ice Age, I guess. And then after that, it's every set, they start doing rotations and stuff like that. So that was all new. Obviously, certain card types were hella new, planeswalkers. It was wait a minute, okay, now what's a plane? And this was, I think, for a long time before Arena came out. This is why I didn't get into it. I was I don't even know what you do with that. What is that card? I mean, what is this card? I don't understand what a planeswalker is, all this kind of stuff. So going back to thinking about how we played, and there's priority in the stack, and the way that instants and interrupts were kind of a slightly different thing, and all that kind of stuff. I don't even really remember how that played very well. When I came back to it, Arena was really my refresher of oh, right. I mean, I still remember, the main phases of the game. You got your first and second mains, combat, end step, all of that kind of stuff. I remember that, but certain nuances being automated on Arena was oh, right, this is how it works. And and then Arena having a planeswalker is oh, that's how they work. You can tick them up or down, and you can attack them like they're another player. Okay, that part actually came back pretty quickly because I'd been away for so long. I'd completely forgotten the older modes of how to play. That makes any sense.
You don't need to learn how to ride a new bicycle if you barely knew how to ride the first one.
Right. It might have been different had I played. When did they introduce the stack and the first way they did that? It was very late 90s, early 2000s.
99 is when it was.
Okay, 99. Right. So if maybe let's say if I had stopped playing in 96, 97, and then came back in 2005, right? I'd be I don't understand. What? I think that might have been a bigger shock.
Yep.
So sort of remembering the main framework of the game, and then having a sort of essentially a robot teach me I can just jam games on Arena without any sort of feeling of shame or stakes to it. It was oh, okay, right, I get how to play the game. So that all came back pretty quickly. The bigger change was learning new formats. Oh, okay, this commander thing. You do what now? Okay, very interesting.
Did you engage with Brawl at all on Arena before getting into Paper Commander, or was that not even a thing you looked at?
So when those Eldraine decks, when Eldraine came out and they had the 4 Brawl decks, they had them for a weekend or a while. I don't even remember how long they had Brawl with those 4. They basically just repeated the pre-constructed Brawl decks that were released in paper. I did play with that, but I didn't even understand the format. I was wait a minute. Okay, so your creature dies, but you can recast it, but it costs a little bit more. Oh, okay, that seems pretty cool. Okay, that's kind of neat. Yeah, I was real slow on the uptake. But then I was okay, that's cool. Opening up those enchantments and stuff and building that Sithis deck is when I really took the dive on Commander as well, and then just started following Commander content like crazy. How to upgrades to precons, what are good niche cards for different, scenarios and all that kind of stuff. So I've really and that's what really also brought me to Twitter, started engaging with content creators on Twitter, and mostly on Twitter. I'll chime in on YouTube videos every now and again, but most of my conversations happen on Twitter. And now in person, when I talk to people like you, or I guest on streams and stuff like that.
I have a question following this, but I do have a quick comment of first commander deck being in Selesnya is something we have in common, and I'm very much a fan of that.
Hey, let's go. So what's weird is I'm probably like my own like personality and my own outlook on life. If you were going to say, okay, pick one of these 10 guilds, who are you? I would probably come down on the Selesnya side, you know, but do I have another Selesnya deck? I think that's the only one I have. Part of it is like, I feel like that archetype needs a little bit of a revisit for things that it can be, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's going to be tokens, or it's going to be
tokens or ramp or enchantments. What's a
ramp, enchantments, +1/+1 counters, or go wide tokens. I do have another Selesnya deck. I run Kyler. It's a human typal deck, and I really like that deck because it's go wide and go tall. If you can keep Kyler on the battlefield, I spruced up that precon a lot. I probably have like 20 or 30 upgrades in it. It's like a shell of the precon, and the alternate commander is the face commander, and it can pound people if it sticks around. People who know that deck go, oh, I got to get this guy off the battlefield because he buffs your whole team.
Kyler is absolutely insane. We have that deck in my personal play group, and the pilot of that deck always seems to think it's not as powerful as it is, but it really does present an inevitable win at early courses of the game.
I'm very scared of Kyler. I've never actually seen one at my table, but between Shannon and Matt Morgan over at EDH Recast, I've heard nothing but, yeah, this is a problem, and I am very scared of that.
It can be a problem. I'm trying to remember. There's a creature in there that, like, when a creature dies, it gives all your other creatures +X/+X, which was that creature's power when it exits the battlefield. So if you got like a bunch of humans and a free sack outlet, like I've looped it so that it's like, oh, I've got like 16 dudes on board, but they die. I sack one, they all get +8/+8. Oh, now I'm gonna sack another one. That guy's a 16/16. I'm gonna sack another one. So I've had like a horde of guys that are like, 72s coming at you or whatever. So it can get nuts pretty quick.
Not an uncommon sight in Kyler. This doesn't really count because it lasted all of a month. But the first deck I ever actually constructed for Commander was actually Reese the Redeemed. So we were all on that Selesnya train, I guess. Now I'm a Grixis fanboy, but definitely had roots in that green, especially just being such a welcoming color to new players.
That actually leads me to the question I had, though, that I was meaning to lean into. So, since you were a relatively new player going into things when you grabbed onto your Enchantress deck as the deck of your choice, she very quickly built a reputation of being somebody who was very scary as a very powerful Enchantress of just 2 mana, drawing cards, gaining life, and being very hard to stop once she gets going, especially because she's so cheap to recast. As a new player, were you subject to any sort of unfounded early targeting for that sort of thing? Did you feel like you may have picked something that was a bit higher caliber than what you were expecting, or was there like weird table dynamics?
No, I don't think so, but for a couple reasons. I think now that deck has a special place in my heart, but I do mostly try to avoid the 2-drop, do a thing, draw a card, build around. I try to like challenge myself a little bit more. Like, I'm going to build this commander either in a weird way, or I want a commander that seems like impossible to actually be good, things like that. But I mean, I love Sithis. So it's funny, the first time I took it out, I didn't build it very well. I didn't quite understand how some different pieces of interaction that I might need or board state or whatever. And I don't think I built it very well. So I didn't get targeted that way. The next time I took it out, I was at a table where she played against Urza and a Paco Haldon deck that were both going bananas. So I was like, I was just in the mix, right? I was like drawing a million cards, but like, dude had Matic Reversal, Isochron Scepter combo out, and it was just like, it got real silly. I don't feel like I've been targeted or felt like it was like, oh, I'm somehow stumbled into a deck that's too powerful for my ability to pilot it or anything like that. I don't play her that much anymore, just because there's always a shiny new toy that I'm trying to like perfect and stuff like that. So
I think that was a great question though, because I think that's something that a returning player would like maybe have difficulty understanding if they pick up a deck. Like, say they picked up Urza, you know, like you sit down with Urza, people are going to assume things about your deck and your piloting and your play style.
Yeah.
And I could see that being like a bad, because I've definitely had people who like just quit Magic outright because they picked up a deck, got completely smashed because of what they're playing, and they're just like, I don't want to play because I'm obviously like getting targeted, and you know, it doesn't feel good. It's hard to understand your threat.
These people are picking on me. So what's really interesting, my local scene is very I play at a particular LGS. They run Commander almost every night. There is a CDH scene that they've decided to run separate tables for CDH, because I do think maybe there was a time when it was like people would get paired up at random and it would be like, you know, somebody just get completely clobbered. They come in with their pre-con and somebody's running a Rog side deck or something and just getting smoked. But one of the things that I have found in the era of content creation and EDH Rec and, you know, all of the different YouTube channels is I think that like a lot of people start out with decks that are really effing powerful, and I'm attracted to a little bit. I mean, I like doing big, fun, splashy stuff or whatever, but I like the table to be a little bit more interactive. I know some people who have like they're fairly new to the game, but they've just like built like super duper optimized Alibu decks or whatever that are like just can lock you out of playing the game. And it's like, is this fun for you to like, you know, take a 30-minute turn and nobody else can really do much of anything? And it's like, yeah, it's fun for me because I win. It's like, yeah, like, it's a social game. We should all be like, at least I don't mind losing, but I hate getting like locked out of the game and people being kind of unaware of where they're at.
There's two decks of mine that I feel like one deck I definitely play a ton, but one I don't play as often. One of them is basically an attempt at a color shift deck where instead of being your normal spell slinger colors and I decided to go Orzhov. And
oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that deck, the way that it kind of ended up playing on its first couple of runs, because the commander is Firja, and if you don't remember Firja, I don't blame you. She's an uncommon. 5 mana 2/4.
No, she's an angel. I know that she's from the Kaldheim set, but I don't know I can't remember what she does.
5 mana 2/4 lifelink flyer. Whenever you cast your second spell in a turn, you strategic planning. Look top 3, put one in your hand, rest in your graveyard.
Oh, okay.
So that deck plays a lot of the effects that want you to kind of play into that kind of thing. So you have your flashbacks, your suspends, your ways of casting things for free, which kind of gets me into trouble in the second part, which I'll get into. That deck eventually kind of landed on a control into, I'm going to play Bolas' Citadel deck. And that,
fair.
When it gets to a point where it's kind of going through and doing its thing, it can take these 7-minute turns or so where it's accruing value, putting out big beaters, and usually the way it wins is either by, ironically enough, combat damage, just by equipping Firja with a Glammed Ring and just making her +20/+0 and just smacking someone to death.
Or just smacking somebody upside the head.
But the other times it's just, the deck has a ton of removal, it's a ton of other things like that, and it can get into that kind of thing where it can feel that way, and being aware of the table dynamics is something scary. But the other big deck that I definitely know not to play is, unless somebody's bringing out the big guns, is Nicol Bolas Notion Thief Wheel. I don't need to really explain anything special about that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That deck is not very hard to explain. It's just being aware of social dynamics, like, hey, I have 28 cards in hand. You have nothing. Have fun with that. Some people will go into things like they played Yada Lock in Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in the day. It's like, oh, I want to go play Yada Lock again in Commander. It's like, yeah, but you're going to get punched in the face by the guy with a Voltron deck because you locked all their cards out of their hand. Like, I don't know what you expected to happen.
What's going to happen here? Right. Yeah, so I do think that, like, the Rule Zero conversation, I know, like, people have a lot of different attitudes about that, or there's varying takes on how useful it is. I like some of the people's metric of, like, what is your deck trying to do? How fast can it win? And, like, if you can get that out there, you know, I like, you know, and like sometimes at my LGS, like, it'll be somebody's only got the one deck that they brought with them, you know, and it's like, so you get, you know, trying to find maybe something that matches, that it doesn't, like, if you're a new player. So my best experience playing LGS was when the Doctor Who precons came out. A guy came in, totally huge Doctor Who fan, bought it, sat down to play. It was his first game of Magic, not just playing Commander and paper. It was the first time he had played Magic. The store paired me and a couple other like experienced players who I guess we have a good reputation for being friendly or being able to explain it to people or whatever. That was awesome though, to be able to be like, hey, this is a social game. We're going to show you how to play. We'll help you out here. Like, oh, don't do that because now you're going to be open up to this attack, or like you should really play that right now. Some of the Rooster Teeth guys have started to get into Magic now. I guess now that Magic, yeah, Carrie.
Nice.
So we taught Eddie Rivas from Rooster Teeth to play. I played against him in his first game of Commander. We're playing, and he leans over at one point. He goes, "Hey, should I play this?" And it was a mana drain from the OTJ like breaking news stuff, and it was the perfect time to play it. And he's like, "Should I play this?" I was like, "Yes." Play that right now. Yeah, yes. It was a very key moment of the game. It was hilarious. It was very hilarious.
Oh man, that's always a fun one. I remember opening my first mana drain back in Iconic Masters, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. It's just anytime anybody gets the opportunity to play it for the first time as a casual player, it's just like, feel the power.
Yeah, it's a counter spell, and I get all of that juice when it's my turn. Hey, this is awesome.
I remember everybody remembers their first mana drain. Mine got me Ramos Dragon Engine out off of the colorless mana into Sign of the Ur Dragon into the Ur Dragon off of popping the Ramos. So
there you go.
Going back to what you said about having people, coming into your play group, or having people new learning, kind of letting them know, like, this is the perfect time to use that, please do. I think that's pretty much the ideal when it comes to paper Magic. Obviously, getting into like Arena to like relearn the game is pretty perfect because, like you said, there's no pressure. You just kind of learn. It's very straightforward. It's probably the best way to get into it. Commander, definitely not the best way to get into Magic, but the pipeline's inevitable, right? You always end up in there. So I think that's definitely the way to do it.
You end up there for sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's how I ended up learning. I came from Yu-Gi-Oh! Though, so it's just a matter of like learning how priority worked compared to the chain, which is a little bit different in its intricacies, but that's really about it. Besides that, it was just like everything was basically the same, except for your standby phase was after your draw step. So it's like, that was the only thing I had to get the other way around. It's like, do this, then draw, not draw, then do this. But besides that, I think that the big thing when it comes to people coming back to the game, though, or learning it for the first time, but especially people that are coming back, is mostly learning what it is that they want to get out of it. So when you were initially playing the kitchen table Magic way back when, you said you were playing with 5 or so people, did you ever even briefly consider trying any of the more competitive singleton 60 card formats?
No, I think it was, this is at a time when the internet is barely taking off, right? This is like, Usenet stuff, even before there's like full on web browsers. So it was hard to know like what was out there. And I liked the game a lot, but I wasn't hardcore dedicated enough to even find out about, that this is a thing that is like, I knew it was like a phenomenon and it was like very popular. So the thing that I kind of got into it for was also like, I would flip cards on Usenet. I'd sell cards too. The early days of like, people buying singles and stuff like that. I guess it was Legends came out. I bought a box of Legends and then flipped a bunch of them to help me move to Europe when I got out of college. So, looking back now, I mean, it was great. It's where I met my wife and all this kind of stuff. So I wouldn't change anything, but I do wonder, I can't even remember some of the cards that I sold. I'm sure I probably sold some cards that are now like crazy expensive, like from the Legends era.
You probably sold Tabernacle at some point for $20, I imagine.
I don't even know if I pulled that. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's like if I would have had something like that, but I don't think I pulled the Tabernacle, but I don't even remember. I mean, I have a bunch of legends, but I have all the. I mean, the thing about that set was like so many of the legends were just terrible. It's like, wait, this is a 7-drop 4/6, like, and it has no abilities. Like, what are we doing here?
I remember, the only Legends cards I've ever played against as a commander is actually, maybe I played against 2. I need to see if Nebuchadnezzar or whatever the heck his name was from Legends.
He was.
But I remember.
He was.
Oh, he was? Okay, I played against him, and I played against I can't remember his name. He was like a guy riding a horse in Jund where you could tap to regrowth something, I believe. Like a 3-mana 1/2.
Yeah. I can't remember.
You've never played against Rasputin? OG Rasputin?
No, never.
Oh, that was an amazing.
Yeah.
I bought that card in a foreign language because it was just the cheapest version of it, because reserve list or whatever. And that deck was insane. And it's retired now because it's actually crazy strong for being a Legends commander.
You tap, and what do? You tap and take control of stuff, or no?
You regrowth.
Regrowth it. Okay.
Yeah. Rasputin makes mana. That's it. He just makes mana, but he's in the colors to blink himself. So he makes 7 colorless mana. If you can find a way to turn that into a blink, you just keep making mana. And you can see how like it just turns into degenerate nonsense.
Gets out of hand.
Aiden Oakenshield was the one I was thinking of. 3 mana and tap. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So
Gotcha.
The activation cost is 3 and tap. Now he's $100 now. Okay.
Yeah, they just keep getting more expensive.
There's a mono green version of the same guy where the only restriction you have to tap him before your main phase, and he's like 30 cents, but you lose out on black and red. When you were coming back to Magic, the thought of competitive Magic didn't cross your mind either?
Not really. My younger son has played in some modern events. You know, he had a little modern deck for a while. It never really crossed my mind. Partly, I like the variance that you get with a singleton deck in playing Commander. That, like, even if you're running tutors, even if you're whatever, it just feels like a lot more variance. Like Modern is just, like Modern, Pioneer, any of the sort of sanctioned competitive formats, just like never really crossed my mind. I mean, I like playing Standard on Arena. I don't play it I'll jump in ranked every once in a while. I haven't upgraded decks in a long time. When they do rotation this summer, I'll probably try to jump in and like kind of maybe take a look at like, okay, like what if I was going to build like a real like meta competitive Standard deck in Arena, what would that look like? But I haven't really even done that.
$20 says there's going to be some shieldings involved.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's
right.
FNM was much more of a thing.
For sure, right. And that's all, and that kind of, I guess, died with the pandemic. So that's the other thing is I got into Magic in the middle of the pandemic. So I feel like for a lot of established players, that was like a rough time, or it was like a real resorting, and like what's, like ours, these sets maybe didn't do well because like there was not a lot of, organized play, etc. I missed out on all of those feelings because I was like kind of coming in fresh. I don't really know what it was like if you were like somebody, heavily invested in competitive Magic come, April of 2020, what that felt like, so I don't really know.
As somebody who's fringe interested in the formats, I guess, most of my interactions with Modern are through doing more silly shenanigans, like how many rhinos can I put on the battlefield? That kind of thing. For me, I saw the decline of competitive in that way, like especially of arena-based formats. People weren't very interested in trying to go after that. Spell Table was taking off, so on a more casual format focus kind of thing, things exploded. On the competitive side of things, if you weren't already used to Moto, or you weren't already into Modern, you were having a bit of a rough time. And especially at that time, Pioneer was having a bit of a downswing because this was the time of inverter combo. It was not a fun time for the people trying to get into that format because Pioneer was brand new at the time and people were super excited. And,
right.
then it kind of died down. I feel like it's kind of like in a semi-similar position now, but not quite. It's not nearly as bad as Inverter. It's just kind of stale. for the inclination of me that wanted to go and play competitive side of things, it was definitely a little bit of a bummer, but 90% of me is doing stuff in Commander, so I wasn't as affected.
Yeah, and like, you know, like I follow enough content to kind of get, okay, these seem to be, you know, what's going on in the formats. These are the cards that are troublesome or powerful or whatever. Because I'm just like, no, I'm not in it to win anything. I'm not in it. I'm not a grinder in that sense. So like, I mean, like somebody described, you know, look, like Modern is like, everybody is trying to do a super busted thing, and you want to just be the person to get to the busted thing that your deck wants to do first, right? And then there's like some built-in stuff to maybe throw the other guy, you know, the other person off of their game plan of doing their busted thing. You kind of know what the meta, I mean, people know what the meta is, right? And then a new set comes out and they kind of go, people go off and brew and they crack it. And then it's like, you know, you have like 2 or 3 weeks of the meta resettling and whatever. I'm just like invested enough to go after that thing. And so I like, oh, like, hey, here's a new set. Oh, okay. I've got some decks. Here's like 7 or 10 cards. Oh yeah, I could see how that would go. I could put that in this deck, or that can go in this deck. And then maybe every once in a while I'll be like, oh, this legendary is doing something I've never seen in like those color combos before. Let me see like what I can do. Actually, the thing that is like at me engaged with Magic as much as I have been over the past 3 years is I'm a big user of Moxfield, but any of the other deck builders sites where you can do this stuff, I like going on Moxfield and like kind of like doing a little, you know, theory brewing with, you know, like, oh, what if you did this, you know, whatever. And it's like, I'm playing a little puzzle game with myself before I even sit down to play some Magic. So I enjoy that. And I guess obviously people who brew in Pioneer or Modern or whatever are doing those kinds of things as well. I'm just doing it with a focus on EDH. I've started to kind of get into Oathbreaker a little bit. I mean, obviously similar deal with like having singleton rules and that kind of stuff, but
yeah. Moxfield, especially being a resource that's like, you know, depending on when you got out of the game, like maybe, you know, deck building sites were a thing. Obviously, the forums were a little bit more of a prominent thing back in the day. But that's like such a huge difference is now you've got all the players in the game all working together to crack a format, end up seeing these cards way faster. Not quite as much brew space. EDH Rec's another part of that too, but you know, we have way more tools now than we ever did. So it really is like a totally different brewing landscape.
I'm going to just interject real quick and just say, if you're using Tapped Out, stop. It's as old as me. Please, for the love of God, stop it. And I kind of had that thought earlier. It's like, wow, Shannon mentioning like if he had played back in 96, 97, it's like, wow, I was born in 96 or 97. Oops.
Oh, right. Yeah, right.
If she didn't start with Tapped Out, she's too young for you, bro.
So that also, I don't know, I'm sure Architect Tech does this as well, but like the integration of Moxfield and the Scryfall database is really good. You can go like, okay, I'm going to go look for any, you know, I'm thinking about Assassin's Creed. So I'm going to go look for any assassins in this color identity that are 2-drops. What can I find? And, you know, you're like, oh, okay, here's a card. You know, then you dig up cards you've never seen before. And so I really like that. I actually started to prefer doing like queries on Scryfall more than EDH Rec. I feel like I will go look at EDH Rec at the end and be like, did I miss anything? But like, I don't, like, initially I was like, when I first started getting into EDH, I was like, oh, you know, I was living on that page. I'm like, what do people play in this deck? Oh, I've never heard of that card before. Now I'm like way more familiar with the cards and what might be a good fit in these decks. And I'll take a look at EDH Rec for corner cases, but I don't try to brew off of like what's already out there.
Right. That's generally my strategy too. You start with the Scryfall searches and find like the niche cards that do exactly the thing you want. I find that's a good way to find like, the thing with EDH Rec is it kind of like self-feeds into itself, so you'll kind of see the same cards over and over and over.
Well, part of that is it depends on what it is, right? Because we're talking about what's a popular pre-con commander. The new Is It Lady, for example, the one where you tap her, do that kind of thing. A lot of the cards that are not necessarily even good for that deck are going to pop up in the data feed for that, just because people are porting in the straight deck list as it is, just to try to get a playtest feel for it. So like even a card that's not necessarily great for it, unless it's like completely out of left field, like if there was a random 7-drop dragon that had nothing to do with instant sorceries in the deck, like yeah, that would have like an almost 1% inclusion rate in finalized decks. Like people would take that out literally immediately, but data like that is a pre-con effect of that nature, is just kind of indicative of what's going to happen with that. And it's just EDH rec is EDH recommendation, not EDH prescriptions. They're not forcing you to go play any of those things. It's just I don't love the rhetoric of EDH rec is ruining diversity of a format, because you are fully in control of what data sets you're seeing. It's just it's seeing what people are able to seeing what people are including, not necessarily that they should or should not be. There's if a card has like a 1% inclusion rate out of like a 3,000 commander deck list or like a 25,000 deck list, that's still 250 people. That's 250 people that have an agreement with you in some respects. So I think that the aggregate is not necessarily indicative of the overall whole, and people need to go and be a little bit more formulaic with how they interact with those sort of things, instead of just going and saying that EDH rec is the reason that the format's modernized.
For sure. It's absolutely a great tool. And like I will sometimes, like, it's fun to go look at commanders that 80%, 85% of the people build this commander, they build it this way. But what if, are there people who are like, are there people like making a Selesnya vehicles deck with this commander? Like what does that look like? And then you can like filter, and I do like that, where you can filter it by the kind of build that it is. And you're like, oh, okay, so there are people who have these ideas. I like looking at it sometimes with those like other filters on, or like, what would this look like in a super high budget, lower budget?
Exactly. We briefly mentioned this, but we were talking about how Selesnya was a little bit narrow, for example. People may remember Bernard, the Bant guy that makes token copies of things that die.
I played against one of those not too long ago.
Yeah.
Pumping out little food golems.
The way I play my Selesnya deck, it's Tristani Selesnya's voice. It basically plays like Bernard in a lot of the same ways, but I just don't have the blue clone effects.
Okay.
Like that new 2-mana enchant creature guy, the Bestow guy, where you could pay 2 on certain timing conditions to make token copies of things. That's the kind of card that I need for that deck for it to succeed. But being able to go out, it's like, no, I don't need a card like Advent of the Worm. I'm not going to try and populate 5/5s. I'm going to make as many copies of Nyxbloom Ancient and Selesnya as I can, and I'm going to make it to where I played that deck and I tapped a flipped Itlamok for 4.6 quadrillion mana. So
this absolute menace.
I'd say that that's Tristani is popping off. So
only works in paper, by the way. Crashes everything else.
I haven't tried.
Starts trying to do them. Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh.
New players and EDH rec go hand in hand in a lot of ways, though. You did mention.
I have learned a lot from it. Absolutely. And now, but I just feel like, I don't need. I already know the landscape well enough that I can build 85% of the deck with what I know I have, or with what I'm already thinking about. Oh, this would be a great fit for this or whatever. And then like, okay, well, let's follow up and take a look. Are people doing this a different way, or what else is out there?
Do you think that some of the prescriptive nature of sites like EDH rec, or the overwhelming popularity of certain commanders like Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, or some other things of that nature could be leading people to think, I can only play this certain thing in this certain way, and I don't feel like it's very creative? Or do you think it's a better thing that people have such narrow things that they can start them with? Because there's 2 different ways they could look at it, right? For me, it's just like, everybody else is doing that thing, I don't want to do that. But somebody else who's new may want that level of, Atraxa is very popular because she's very good at what she does, and so I can just build an Atraxa deck and I can get started with playing the game and be kind of on even footing with people.
Yeah, I think everybody's probably got to answer that question for themselves, and what you're looking for out of the game, and what are you looking for out of the game, and what kind of experience do you want your deck to be, right? I am very much, I like I've kind of alluded to, I kind of like the puzzle making experience of like, can I make this thing work? Can I pull this off? Is this, it would be neat to play this commander in a way that I have never seen people play before, or even like, let's try a approach to play that I haven't seen before. But then sometimes I just, then there's like other decks that are like, hey, this is a zombie deck and it's just gonna make a bunch of zombies and we're gonna go crazy. Like I was saying in my local meta, like even some of the new players, I do feel they maybe haven't answered that question for themselves 100%, because I do feel sometimes it's like, oh, we are playing the most powerful version of this deck as possible, and is it a good time? Like, are you having fun with this? Like, maybe you are, but it doesn't seem like it's necessarily fun for anybody else. I was playing in a game, I was not subject to this attack, but like somebody was playing a Muldrotha deck that was like, again, took like there was just so many game actions that were going on. And like the guy who was being attacked was like, he had his head in his hands as this, between the declaration of attack and when like we needed to start figuring out damage was like 15 or 20 minutes, and he was just like had his head in his hands, and it was like, okay, maybe that Muldrotha deck is a little bit too overjuiced for what other people are looking for at this table.
Yeah, welcome to Muldrotha. I think the only thing that you could have made that kind of distinction with is probably AC or Tatiova. It's like, oh, the exact same thing's gonna happen there, except instead of all the permanent types, it's just a single land drop is costing the exact same amount of stuff.
Right, it's just like a bunch of stuff going on. But then sometimes it's like, when you're the one piloting that, it's like, hey, this is pretty fun. Watch me cook over here, so...
I think there's all kinds of players in the game, and like if you're the kind of player that just wants to take a deck list off of EDH Rec and just play it, like maybe you're not interested in brewing at all, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that inherently. Just like there's nothing wrong with just grabbing a precon and just playing it out of the box. It's kind of the intended like new player experience in a way. In general, it's just a good resource to have. I think that if you're coming back to the game and you want to get into Commander, like being able to just grab a precon or grab a pre-made list, and you can tweak it after. There's the thing. It's like getting to play is like the most important thing, because you can always make tweaks to the deck.
I'm also new enough. Like I feel like I started playing EDH at a time when precons were, a lot of them are really strong right out of the box and can hold their own.
That is the deck I mentioned earlier. Just completely bounced me. That thing is strong.
I have the Nalia Party Time deck, which I have not taken it apart. It was like, I was intending to do some upgrades to it, and then I was at an event and my son played it and just steamrolled the table. And I was like, huh, okay. And then the next few times it was out, it was like, oh, this deck is, I'm not going to do anything with it. So it's just like, okay, let's leave this completely alone. And I can just say, okay, I've got a handful of decks that are like, it's just, the precons, completely unedited. It's just like, let's go. I like having access to that stuff too. So
I think all three of us did not start with a precon, but you've definitely, based on your Doctor Who story, you've seen somebody who very much did start with a precon that got the effect. But
I absolutely started with the precon. Started Magic with the precon in a live environment. I
assume you've seen other people in non-Universes Beyond contexts pick up precons to actually get started with the game, though, or has that not been your experience?
Sometimes, I mean, again, at the LGS I go to, every once in a while, people will be like, oh, they'll just snag, because they, the store's well stocked, so they'll be like, oh, I came up here with my buddy and I didn't have anything. Oh, I'll go grab one and sleeve it up, So I have seen people do that, grab a precon and go, and just like a Magic IP precon, not a Universes Beyond thing. But I don't see that happen too often.
Something that you never really see these days is that most LGSs, at least ones that are actually affiliated with Wizards, should have beginner kits for new players or returning players. They're just like these little pre-made decks so you can kind of learn the game on. And when I actually got into Magic, they didn't have any of these in stock. So they gave me a box with unsorted bulk. They asked me what colors I liked, and I was like, I don't know, green and black, because that was the only cards I'd seen so far. And they're like, all right, here's a box of unsorted bulk of green and black cards. We haven't even looked through these. Just take this. And that's actually where I found my Reese the Redeemed that I ended up building around. Funnily enough, which is at the time was a very expensive card.
Yeah, like it was $35 for the longest time.
It was a crazy find, but like even that was just like that pole vaulted me into playing Magic. So like I have all these new cards and all these cool things, and oh my god, this card's just called Murder and it just kills a dude. Like that's awesome. One of my favorite cards that came from that was, I think it was just an enchantment, I think, that gave something, or Murderous Compulsion actually, and it's just destroy target tapped creature. And I remember it because it had the most metal flavor text of all time, which is, if I can recall this correctly, this blade gets so hot in my hand, but your blood has quenched it. Thank you.
Oh man,
I gotta look at Murderous Compulsion. Yeah, thank you. This blade becomes so hot in my hand, but your blood has quenched it. That is in fact 100% the flavor text.
So good.
You started the game during the pandemic, so you probably didn't have a lot of those experiences, but that was actually something very similar to me. My best friend, he still is at the shop as a dishwasher, and he bought a set of Magic cards from his coworker. It was initially supposed to be $20, but then ended up being $10 because like all of the rares that he had was stolen by his roommate. We open up the box and we see all these. It's a bunch of commons. There's like, I want to say something like 20 Bajuka Bogs in there, and like 5-6 copies of Expedition Map. So a bunch of commons that are actually worth a lot. So relatively speaking,
yeah, like
one and a half,
decent cards. Yeah,
and then we go cards. And they're but the two crown jewels for me were like a Cavern of Souls. Like, wow, a $35 card. I say, not knowing what it's going to be later on down the road. And a very first M10 oil printing of Cultivate that I still have in Tristani to this day. Like, those are
that's very nice.
Like those experiences of new players, like when they're like going around and buying stuff for the first time, when it's from a secondhand source, not through like in LGS or through packs. I think that's something that I love hearing stories about, and I'm hoping that I'm wrong, that you actually got to experience some stuff like that in the few years you've been playing.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't think I've ever just like picked up like a chunk of bulk and gone, oh my god, look, there's this card, whatever. How did this get sorted in here? But I do think finding those old dual lands of mine was a very similar feeling. It was like I was going through somebody else's, but a much younger version of myself, and I was like, oh, look at this! Oh my, what? I have 7 of them. So yeah, that was pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
If you're watching the video version of this podcast, put a timestamp where the cats are in the video.
He's not a fan, but I mean, he came up here to go and say hi, so.
What's your cat's name?
He's Teddy. Teddy is a butthead.
What's up, bud? Oh.
I mean, he knows where I live. He can do whatever he wants to me after I'm asleep.
One question I really wanted to ask you, Shannon, because this is something that I deal with especially at pre-releases, we tend to have a lot of new players at the shop I play at, a lot of newer returning players, is that they come in and they're doing pre-release, and it's usually like the newest set, it's not usually like a draft. They tend to really over-evaluate some of the effects on new cards. Did you have any like initial coming back where the cards were like just so insanely overtuned compared to like Savannah Lions? I remember being obsessed with like a 1-drop creature with lifelink and death touch, thinking that's so OP. And in the context of Sealed, it's pretty good, but I remember finding out later when I built like a keywords deck that it's like, oh, this is not a good card. I just really over-evaluated this.
Or whatever. So, it's funny. I have various feelings about that kind of stuff where, I mean, I get it. Like, and I think if I'd been playing all the way along, I would definitely go, oh yeah, everything is pushed and there's a lot of power creep, and there's I do, even in the 3 years that I've been back, I think that it's like, when's the last time we just got like a vanilla creature with like no abilities on it? Not even a year ago? Just like, okay. What was it? I don't even remember what it was.
Yargle and Multani.
Okay, right, because it's just a big beater 18-3 or.
But that's like the point, right? The point is that it's a vanilla beater.
But besides that, I don't think it's been since like 3 years.
But it is in and of itself legendary, right? So you're not gonna have like a deck of like, I guess if you're playing like standard, you would still run multiples, but But like, yeah, just like, oh, hey, this is a 4/4 elk. Okay, cool. That's all it is, or whatever the case might be.
At this point, French
Okay,
vanilla has
so-
replaced vanilla, like single
Yeah.
keyword.
We don't even.
Say.
It doesn't even have to be a vanilla creature to be giant nowadays. Like we just got a 7/3 in Modern Horizons 3 with relevant card text on it. Like it's very much. We're very much past the point of having vanilla creatures for like no specific reason.
Yeah, I was thinking about the question. I'm like, I remember being enamored by. Neither one of you two will probably remember what this card does off memory. It's called Implement of Improvement. Yeah, that look is exactly what
I remember the card. I don't remember what it does. I have this in my bulk.
What set is this from?
This is Aether Revolt when I started. 2017.
Okay, so this.
It's not even that old.
Yeah,
in
it's
the big picture, not that old.
no. It is a 1 mana artifact. You can pay a white to sacrifice it to gain 2 life, and when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card. I thought that just the fact that it cantripped and gave you something for it, for a total of 2 mana that you didn't even have to pay for all at once, was like, yo, every deck that can play white in standard should play this just to like filter through the deck and like buffer the life total. It's so good.
And it sees 0 play, I'm guessing. Yeah.
I'm gonna go and assume it's sub 500 decks on EDH Rec.
Yeah.
Okay, actually no, it's like it's 3067. But
Well,
it's
got a place in like life gain decks, obviously.
it's all artifact decks.
Yeah, and any artifact that cantrips when it ETBs or leaves the battlefield is probably pretty good in certain decks. I've played those kind of cards.
Literally the only reason why anyone would play any 1 mana artifact that just it could say literally nothing on the card text and it'll see just as much play in those decks.
So but I do have 2 observations about cards. I do feel like because I've had to go back and learn a lot of the history of Magic that I was absent for. It's like, okay, yeah, cards are pushed now, but like, there's a bunch of cards that are banned in various formats because they're completely broken. And if you release them now, they would, or whatever. So like, there's no, Tabernacle. Tabernacle's from Legends. Like that card is insane. You've got, various, Gaia's Cradle is crazy. Like you go all the way back to Alpha, there's cards that are just super duper powerful. Magic has always had like a balancing, a sort of a pendulum swing of keeping the game balanced. Like the Urza's Saga block is like, there's so many crazy cards out of that set that if it came out now, you'd be like, if that set came out now, people would go, oh man, they're really pushing this set. It's too pushed. It's crazy.
I think that if Channel got printed for the first time in Modern Horizons 3, we would just be going, I'm sorry, you did what?
Right, exactly. Right, and that's like, that goes all the way back to Alpha. And so there's that. I also think that there's like, and I don't want to be like, I don't want to play unnice to content creators, but I do feel like there's a real push and pull, even among content creators, where certain big ones, popular ones, let's say, that are like, this is unplayable. It's a 3 mana rock. You can't, it's too slow, blah, blah, blah. On Monday, they'll say that. And on a Tuesday, they'll be like, Wizards, stop making pushed cards. And then it's like, well, wait, you just wanted push, you 3 mana rocks are too slow, but also cards are too pushed. So which is it, right? I kind of feel like we're in a I kind of feel like it's in a sweet spot right now. I don't know. I'm, maybe I'm still fresh and new to playing. I feel like we're in a good spot. I almost like, I can get if you're a content creator that the release schedule is frenetic. Previews coming before sets are even out, where it's like, okay, hey guys, I know the pre-release is this weekend, but the Tuesday before pre-release, we're already going to start previews for the next set that's coming up. Okay, that's wild.
Yeah.
But I kind of think it's like, it takes me back to coming in new, where it's like, there's so many cards, nobody can be expected to know every card. And then it's like, it does have that feeling of like, wait, what does that card do? I like that novelty of like seeing somebody play something I didn't even know existed. It's like, wait, what? I don't know. What does this card even do? I feel like we're getting to that point, even in a given year, you might be like, This came out this year, and I've never heard of it before.
I think the release schedule is a bit frenetic, but I think that sense of, wait, what? That card says what now? Like, that is a thing.
Yeah,
that,
I like it.
Yeah, that's
I
a good
like
thing.
that.
I
like that.
We were never meant to have like that sort of an encyclopedic knowledge about the game by my estimation.
Absolutely.
I just want to experience the cards, you know, and I feel like I don't get a chance to experience them because I have to immediately start thinking about the next set because they're spoiling it. I have to start thinking about that in my decks. I just want a little bit of time to actually pick out the cards I want, play them in some decks, find out if they're for me before I actually have to start worrying about the next set.
Let it breathe for a while. Yeah, that is a good point. So I was playing last Friday and had the Reaver Cleaver out and played it against somebody. So great card, super good card. It's only been printed twice, fairly new card. They were playing an Ur-Dragon deck and they were like, wait, what does this card do? They'd never experienced this card before, and they're like, I need this card in my deck. You know, and they're taking a photo of it. And it was like, it felt kind of cool to be like, okay, I'm playing this card. I feel like this is like a pretty like a new staple in the format, but they'd never experienced it before. So that was kind of fun.
Prior to like 2021, you would have had to have played something obscure like Simulacrum, not the robot, but like it's a black instant that basically like makes you gain life and then redirect the damage to a creature you control. You would have had to play something very niche and specific for people to go like, what does that do? But now you just
what does that do?
literally play the game, and you play the newest thing that came out like a month ago. And it's like, what?
Every other card is like, wait, what does this do? Yeah. And I get it with new, like a brand new precon card, like it's, you know, made for Commander and it just came out. But like, you know, Reaver Cleaver's been out for like, it came out in, I think the Dominaria United precons. So it's been out for like a year and a half or so. Yeah.
I think Commander is definitely the place for like the oddball cards. I mean, that's kind of like always been the intention, right? It's like, this is where you can play your completely unplayable draft shaft. And honestly, it's my favorite part of the game besides just like brewing outright. I would rather have a commander that makes bad cards good than have like just more push cards that make strategies that are already strong like more consistent. Or it's like, even if it's doing it like an interesting way, like that's great, I'm glad they're doing that, but I still would prefer to have like getting commander. It's like, hey, all your stuff has retrace now, go figure out how that's broken. Like that's exciting to me.
Whenever you cast an adventure spell, copy it, you know, whatever the case is, you know, that's going on.
There's a limit to that, because on the one hand, if I was coming back to playing when the first time I played was 2010, I actually played because my middle school teacher had a bunch of draft chaff, and this is at the point where like Conflux and that set was relatively new. New Phyrexia would have been a brand new set on the block. And I was playing with a bunch of Onslaught era chaff. And I was playing with Krosan Groundshaker. It's like a 7-mana 6/6. You can pay a green to give target beast trample. I want a red-green beast-focused commander where I could play all of my terrible Onslaught era draft chaff. Believe me, I want that more than anybody. I want my contested cliffs to actually mean something. But I don't need... At the same time, as much as I would love it, I don't need a red-green beast commander that gives all of my beasts +4/+4 hexproof, trample, and annihilate 2. You know, like it's just there's a point, like there's a middle ground where I would love it, but it's like at the same time that it's a little bit too much. Like I'm holding out for a Thopter commander for one of these days. Like I'm having to go use like a Layla or Brea for that right now. And
no love for Side Master Thopterist.
It's mono blue, that's boring. I already have a mono blue commander deck, and he's a crab that punches people. I already get all my fun with that.
Oh, do you have the big giant crab? Not Charix. Thank you. I knew it's like he's like a 17.
0-17, yeah. Like,
every crab in Magic is OP as hell.
0-17.
Let's go.
I love Charix. He's probably one of my favorite decks because nobody expects to get Voltroned out with 64 commander damage from a 0-17.
The new Black Crab from Modern Horizons 3, the one with a merge that lets you steal things. I lost my match 3 of pre-release to someone casting that crab and free casting the Eldrazi that was in my hand, and it was not just any Eldrazi, it was Emrakul. They got to cast my Emrakul off of that.
No. Oh.
Crabs are OP. They just always are. They either mill you, or they get big, or they steal your Eldrazi.
Crabs, the worst tribe.
I think I've done more commander damage kills with Sherrix than I have the Dragon. And I've had Dragon. I've had Dragon since it was a precon. That is the precon commander, just upgraded over the last like 7 years. Oh god, I've been playing this game.
So I mean, but it's one of those things like Dragon people are scared. It's a scary commander. They're going to try to remove it as many times as possible. I think you fly under the radar with a big crab with 0 power.
It's a good time.
So getting back to our topics, we've been kind of flying all over the place.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you've had a pretty smooth transition getting back into the game. It sounds like you're having a great time, which is fantastic. I'm really glad to hear it.
Yep.
I think that's probably the number one thing to anybody who's interested in this topic is if you want to get back into Magic, or you're wanting to learn Magic for the first time, definitely get into Arena because it's free and it's easy and it's a great way of teaching you how the game actually works. I think it's probably just the best way in general because it's a low pressure and you can kind of just practice as much as you want for free.
Yep.
If you want to get into paper, definitely go to your LGS. There's more than likely going to be somebody there who's willing to teach you, but there's also probably going to be some free starter packs or some bulk you can get, or this is going to happen. I can't guarantee this is going to happen to you, but I've even been in situations where somebody really wanted to get into the game and I ended up just buying them a pre-con, like a cheap pre-con on the spot, because I'm just that kind of person. I want to get people into the game because it's a cult.
I love that. Yeah.
Go out to the places where Magic is played. Go to your LGS. If you have friends who play or just want to learn how to play, bring them with you. It'll be a great time. Even if you're playing the game wrong, like you'll figure it out. It'll be a great time. It's the most wonderful social game that I've ever played.
That sounds good. No, this has been a delight talking with you guys, talking shop, talking about Magic, game we love.
I just love getting people's perspective on these kind of things because it's a perspective that I don't necessarily have. So getting to see things from somebody who's coming back into the game, especially like a huge leap like you did, that's like a totally, like I would never get to experience that for myself, unless I quit Magic now and I come back and it's still around.
If you're gonna come back in the year 2051, right? Like that's horrifying to think about.
Force of Will is completely unplayable.
Can't play Force of Will. Oh, the free
part.
Elementals. Those free Elementals are trash.
Oh Lord.
I mean, we joked about Liliana of the Veil being a bulk of Mythic, and like what is she, like $8 now in only seeing play in very specific decks in various formats at best.
The Tarmogoyf token costing more than Tarmogoyf.
the Fable token, yeah.
Also the Shrine token.
Oh god, but that's a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing.
Tokens should not cost more than cards. Also, cards should not cost more than $1. Fight me.
I think $20 is my limit, but that's all based on some of the things that...
When I first started Magic, I remember telling my friends, like, what kind of idiot would spend $5 on a single card? And now I think that's the baseline.
I remember buying my Wormcoil Engine Invention for like $55, and then it currently is like $120 to $150, and I think the highest of it was $250. Like, yeah, but you can also get a Wormcoil for like 10 to 15 now instead of like the 20, 25 for the baseline. So
right, yeah. The multiple printings thing is good. It's like if you want to be a collector, if you want to, get the chase full weirdo treatment, that's cool. But then if you also just want, more playable copy that's from a pre-con or like a reprint, a standard set or something,
that's how I want it to be. I've got a whole episode planned around that. Like, why are we printing like sought after cards in extremely limited sets? Like, that's not how you get cards into people's hands. Like, it's not reasonable. It does bring the prices down a little bit, but like not by enough.
Yeah. Ragavan and the Mythic Elementals being like Pitch Elementals and Ragavan being what they were at Mythic were just to sell packs, not to make Modern more accessible. That's
Right. Well, Ragavan's unplayable now anyway.
I mean, people still play it even with the advent of stupid Bowmasters.
Oh, not even Bowmasters, just everybody's playing Tamiyo now.
Oh, I'm thinking in a modern context.
So am I.
The new Flipwalker.
People are playing Flip
Tamiyo.
Tamiyo. Yeah.
Wait, Tamiyo? Your pronunciation is like saffron olive level 10.
Pronunciation. Excuse you, sir.
Potato taco.
Awesome.
No one's as bad as Seth. No shade, of course.
We should probably be. We need to go wrap this up though. As much as I love having this conversation, it's been so much fun.
Yeah. I mean, we
Fun.
won't be strangers. I'm sure we'll probably end up all on a stream or something. We'll all be playing Magic together at some point.
Let us hope. Let us hope.
Will do. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure to have you. And all of your links, all the links, relevant links, anything that we talked about will be in the description here or the show notes, depending on where you're watching. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, let us know what you're mad about, because Magic's always something to be mad about, right? It's always something, what's killing Magic today, et cetera, et cetera.